Thanks for being here with me today. Today we will be taking a deeper look at how to transplant and plant plants in our fall assessment prep series. We'll begin by taking a look at a diagram and a how-to, and then we'll jump out into the landscape and get a practical application. So thanks for being here, and let's jump in. Plants, you'll want to dig your hole 2/3 the size of your plant or 3 times the size of your plant. Here in our diagram, you can see the size of our plant is roughly 4 squares. So we have 4 squares dug out to the right side, 4 squares dug out to the left side, 4 squares dug out underneath. Now, you'll want to make sure that you don't set the plant in the bottom of the hole and then fill it in with material. What you'll want to do is you'll want to fill in your hole with good organic growing material, rich, fertile soil, root stimulator, and then a slow active release fertilizer. We'll go over that a little bit more when we have our practical application in the yard. But again, we want to dig our hole 2/3 or 3 times the size of the pot of the plant we are planting. Now that we've discussed how to plant a plant in the classroom, we're going to take a look at how to plant that plant in the landscape. Give you an idea. Get over here. Okay. Want to do when transplanting a plant is identify the drip line. And you're wanting to identify the drip line so that you can attempt to acquire as much of the root system as you can when uprooting the plant. You can damage up to 20-25% of a root system without losing the plant, but it's always best to try to acquire as much of the root system as you can to ensure a more successful transplant. So, a good way to identify the drip line is to look at the foliage or the canopy of the plant. Usually, the vegetation of the plant mimics the root system underneath the plant. So, if you have a dense, compact shrub, it's very likely that it'll have a root ball system. If you've got, a very singular trunk tree, staunch trunk tree, it's more likely to have a taproot system. If you have, a multi-trunk, very arching, canopy-oriented understory tree like a dogwood, then it's more likely to have a fibrous root system or a root system close to the surface. So a good way to find that drip line is to find the edge of your canopy or your vegetation, and that is a good indicator of where that root system is going to be. So let's jump into the landscape and take a closer look at what I'm referring to. Which is right there. So how do you transplant? You can damage a plant's root system up to 25% without losing the plant. So how do you know where that root system is? How do you know whether or not you damaged it? A good way to figure out where a plant's root system is to look at the vegetation itself. It's called the drip line when it comes to trees and shrubs but usually the vegetation somewhat mimics the root system, and that way it's supplying the water to the root system. For example, let's see what your angle is here. For example, on our large mother Bloomis spirea, this perimeter is pretty much what we can assume the drip line will be. Now this plant needs to be headed. So once we do that, it's going to be a much smaller, less leggy plant, and the drip line will be more visible. With our small little volunteer specimen, it's quite obvious where the drip line would be because it's still a very small plant. So what I'm going to do is take, roughly that big of a scoop of the plant to make sure that we don't redam that. Another one. Get that created in the process. Plant those. Okay. So as you can see, the hole or the plant that I'm taking is much bigger than the head. And that's to hopefully not miss out on any of the root system. It's hard to rock. So, to go over that plant, we're talking about the root structure. Look at how here most of the vegetation is on this side, and here's where the majority of the root system is. So again, the foliage is a good indicator of where your root system is going to be at. Bloom, but they are getting close to being done with their bloom. So once the Bloomis spirea is done blooming, then we'll go through and trim it. And here's what I'm referring to as far as it almost being done with its bloom. So as you see on these stalks, these have all gone to seed. In fact, these are dropping their seed right now. That's how we get our volunteers. This one just got done blooming, and now it's just on the very last head. So once it's spent its last head, then we'll come through and we'll do heading pruning. But the pollinators just love Bloomis spireas. Even now we still have bees on them. So we're going to let the pollinators enjoy the Bloomis spirea for as long as they can before trimming it. Here's a few more Bloomis spireas for you guys. These guys are quite small. So they're not quite worth saving or transplanting, but if you have future plans, then it's always a great idea to pick up these tiny little volunteers, and you can pot them just like our dwarf fountain grass there. You can pot them and let them get bigger as specimens outside of the landscape, and then you would just plant them like you would a purchase plant. So let's go ahead and work on getting our Bloomis spirea in the ground since it's got a bare root system. And then we will move on to our dwarf fountain grass. As hard gets. So, as you can see, our native soil out here is not great stuff. Very sandy and clay heavy, and not very nutrient rich. And so that's why we're going to dig our hole significantly larger than our plant, and we'll be able to put good organic soil into it, as well as additional nutrients. And in a way, we're doing a point source soil amendment. Since the entire bed hasn't been amended, we're going to amend the direct spot that we plan on putting our plant. Garden soil is going to already have some nutrients mixed into it. And we're going to refill our hole.
want to put extended release fertilizer in the hole at this point. I am unfortunately out of my extended release fertilizer, but I do have root stimulator that I will be using. Hole. Nice. Fits nicely into our hole. Okay. Make sure anytime you're applying fertilizer or any kind of nutrients that you read the application label. There is a thing of over fertilizing, too much of a good thing when it comes to nutrients in the soil. So just want to make sure you follow the indicated guidelines. Alrighty, now that we've got our root stimulator made, we want to go ahead and put it in the hole. Try not to get it on your hands too much. Got a lot of active ingredients. Okay, now we're going to finish topping our hole off with some good soil. Okay. Now we're cooking. All bubbly from the water in there. Make sure you got enough soil in there that no settling occurs down the road. So right now I can feel the settling that would occur if there's too much porosity. So we're going to add more soil. Okay. See if that puts us closer to where we want to be. Okay. So now I'm not feeling the settling that I was feeling earlier, which is a good sign. We're going to want to lay our weed barrier back down. Find those flaps, lay them back down. And then we'll just want to replace our rock mulch. Voila! You'll want to water it in one more time, but I'm going to let it sit for just a second before doing so.